I need to make this very clear. This is a video about a game, not a person. I am not talking about the developer of this game, or anything that he did outside of the context of this game. I do not care. My focus is games and stories. Thank you. And as always, enjoy the video. You know, it's funny. The first game in this franchise is almost a decade old. And no matter what one person's opinions on the game are, it is an undeniable fact that this one game touched the lives of millions, started many people's careers, and strengthened others, and telling a story of pain, suffering, anger, revenge, and death that will be remembered for generations. Welcome to my thoughts on Five Nights at Freddy's. I have to say, this game's story is wild. So there's the story on the surface of each game. For example, the first two, you're a security guard. Third, you're part of the horror attraction playing the security guard. Fourth, you're given the implication that you're a child. And sister location, you're a service technician. Pizza simulator, you're a business owner. Ultimate Custom Night, you're the antagonist through most of the games. Help Wanted, you're just a normal player, and Security Breach, you're a dumbass kid who doesn't know what an exit is. However, if you start looking just a bit deeper, you'll find there's a whole other story happening in the background connecting through the games, and it's been giving players and fans a bit of a hidden mystery to solve. But good lord, does this story get weird. And it's one of the more difficult ones to explain and even piece together because the story changes directions, kind of like it stops and starts again. If I remember correctly, the developer had to end the story with one of the games and start over, recontextualize things, and completely rewrite other things. There is a particularly good game theory series that I am quite satisfied with, The Ultimate Timeline, and I think Matt gets about as close as anyone can get as to what the story of these games is. But even that isn't without its imperfections. Because of how the story is given to us, there are still holes that just cannot be filled without questions that just don't have an answer. Matt's theory as to what the timeline is has to take liberties and make judgment calls on what the gaps would be because there's just nothing to go on. So, is this video going to be an attempt to look at the overarching story? As much as I would absolutely love to do that, that's more of MatPat's territory. And if even he can't piece one together without some holes after what I can only imagine is months of work on the back of years of prior theories, there ain't no way in hell I'd be able to do any better. So I will look at the games as they are. I mean, there's plenty to talk about in that regard anyway. So, let's start with the first game. And for this game and this game only, I will talk about more than just the story behind it. I'll talk about the mechanics. I'll talk about the environment. I'll talk about the atmosphere. I'll talk about the sound design. I'll talk about the horror elements. And I'll talk about the gameplay. By the end of this video, you will know exactly what I think about this game in all aspects. Let's get started, shall we? So the very first game in this series, the OG Five Nights at Freddy's. Can you believe this was released in 2014? I played the fuck out of this game after it was released. I watched Markiplier play it and I was hooked. I wanted to experience it for myself. I love horror. It's one of the most fascinating genres to me. It's such a personal experience, and depending on the person, it can be a real challenge to find that sweet spot that will scare the player the most. As I said before, I don't think I ever felt a real, deep-seated fear when playing a horror game. I never felt scared from a game. Doing that is difficult because of the kind of horror that I prefer. And this is the part that I think is going to surprise a fair number of people watching. This game was able to do it. It was just once, for one small moment when I watched Mark's first video. And I was never able to get it back, but for the tiniest, minuscule moment, I was uncomfortable, and it felt real. That fascinated me. So I bought the game, played it more times than I care to admit, and then something changed. See, when this game first released, I just graduated high school. Since then, I've had a lot more time to experience other horror games, other stories, other themes, and other gameplay styles. And I had time to think about everything. And I finally settled on one thing. I don't think Five Nights at Freddy's is a good game. Now you know a little bit of my history with the game. Let's talk about it. I'll do something a little different for this one. Ordinarily, for these types of videos, I go into the story first and try to be as objective as possible. For this video, however, I'm going to remain completely subjective and give you 100% what my personal experience is and what my personal thoughts are. And I'm gonna save the story for last this time because I want to talk about what makes this game scary. My praise for the game, if you will. This game excels at immersive atmosphere. In the first night, or when you take a moment to breathe and allow yourself to be immersed in it, it has a remarkable ability to quickly draw you in, and it effectively uses several very powerful horror elements. Fear of the unknown, keeping your visibility low, providing you a space with light to contrast the dark, and the uncanny valley, as well as allowing the sound design to let you be immersed. It does all of this so well because of how simple it is, and as I've argued before, I found the simpler things to be the most effective for horror. When you load into the game, you're greeted by a small office with a simple UI and environment. You have a light and door control system on either side, a camera, and a small light inside the office. Flip into your camera system and you find an equally simple system of cameras in an ordinary building. And this is where you're hit with the first horror element that you encounter in this game: incredibly low visibility. Between the terrible picture quality in the cameras and the low lighting throughout the building, it's a perfect environment where it shows you just enough for you to see in the room, but not enough to really know what's there until it's right in front of you. And we'll revisit this when we discuss FNAF 3. This is also where you get a bit of the uncanny valley effect. It's the same thing that I mentioned when I was talking about Poppy Playtime. Taking something familiar, in this case a pizzeria with animatronic characters, and morphing it into something that will make you uncomfortable, and we combine this with the visibility. We see the animatronics in angles that give a lifeless and unsettling atmosphere to them, and in the case of Foxy, having a character stare directly at you with the jaw hanging open. Creepy stuff, I'm telling you. And then the camera's going down if you happen to be on it when they move. Sure, it covers up the limitation of the engine, but it also helps with the idea of showing you as little as possible, something that I am quite the fan of. Now, as some will remember, I hate mannequins, and while these aren't mannequins, they're pretty damn close, and they're moving towards you, and no, not okay with that. Now, as we continue to look in the cameras to monitor the demon robots, that's when the first horror element really takes effect. Instead of a bright, well-lit restaurant with lots of people and noises and spaces where you can see everything, we have this dark, decrepit, worn-down building with wires hanging down from the ceiling, trash everywhere, and cobwebs all over the place. An area completely devoid of life and almost completely silent, save for the continuous drone of the light in your office, the sounds of a music box, and Foxy occasionally singing, reminding you that you're not actually alone here, but the things that are with you are not your friends, and they will kill you. Speaking of dark rooms, this low visibility also plays very well into an experience I think almost everyone is familiar with. Looking into a dark room where the shadows will warp and twist what should be familiar to you and just make you ask yourself, is there something there? And this constant buildup of these dark rooms heightens when you do land on a camera with an animatronic and the camera stops working. The animatronic, the thing that was standing still just moments ago, you knew where it was, had just moved closer to you. As the atmosphere and the tension, panic begins to rise. Where did it go? Here we see another element. The animatronic will appear in different angles, and the closer they get to the camera, the more unsettling they become. Almost like there's something unnatural about them, beyond their robotic nature. And what's worse, they know you're watching them. I cannot praise the game enough for its use of shadows, camera angles, and muted colors to have characters blend into the background so you can't quite see them sometimes. When playing this game, using the cameras and allowing yourself to be immersed in the setting, it's no question why it can be terrifying. And as I said before, it utilizes the office really well because it offers that sense of the light to counter the dark. And just like Amnesia, it has a similar sense. It can act as a breath of relief, but not a true one, because you know you're not safe in here. And this is all before talking about the main character of the game, Freddy himself. Before I start with him, I just want to say I like how the game handles the animatronics moving. In some areas, it's not the same utilization of showing as little as possible, but like I said, it shows as much as it needs to. And the poses the characters take in certain areas more than makes up for it, serving to be unsettling. And I know just about everyone got spooked the first time they saw this. And there's really nothing that can match the initial sense of dread once you see that Foxy left his curtains for the first time. It's really amazing how much emotion you can potentially draw from someone by just having nothing there. And speaking of which, Freddy. I love how Freddy was handled. The fact that he actively hides from the camera and stares at it all the time. He knows it's there. He is very different from the rest, and it's impossible to tell if that means he's more dangerous. And his laugh when he moves, in my opinion, the perfect tone for a haunting sound. One that's supposed to bring joy and excitement means you're one step closer to your demise if you're not careful. And there's praise for the rest of the sound design too. The electric hum of the light bulb in your office, the analog scratching of the camera system, it all helps to make the experience seem so real, thus making it all the more immersive. And I think the fact there's no background music, just ambient noise, was the correct choice. And you never really notice how much of a comfort that constant hum and bright light is until you experience the deafening drone of the power going out and everything going silent. love it. Especially if you're not expecting it. It's such a powerful moment of dread. You failed. There's only one thing that can happen now. And I think it was also a good move to not have Freddy kill you outright. The fact that he waits and stares at you rather than immediately kill you just serves to increase the tension as much as possible before you finally die. And I can't complain about it. If you're immersed, it works. Like I said, I love the atmosphere that it creates. But Bowie, aren't you going to talk about the gameplay? Yes. Very, very briefly, but yes, I am. When I played it for the very first time, I thought it was fun, and then I played more and more games over the years, and I got a good grasp on what I do and do not like. And I do not like grindy games like Destiny, Warframe, or a majority of RPGs. Games that have a repeated gameplay loop. Make you do the same things, play the same missions over and over just for a minor goal. Obviously, not quite the same thing here. We're not playing through Night 3 over and over to get a 1% chance of getting a legendary drop that will put us above the required level so Night 4 will be easier. Obviously not what's going on here. But I don't like the repeated gameplay loop. I don't find it particularly engaging anymore. It's just not the kind of game that I find fun. As I said in a video before, the gameplay is repetitive, and because of that, for me, one of two things happened. I would get bored, or I would get frustrated. Now, I just got done praising the hell out of its environment and immersive atmosphere, and if you're going to play while immersed, that's great. But the problem is, the more you use the cameras throughout the nights, the more power you drain. The more you scramble to find the characters, to know where they are and to know where Freddy is, so you know how close you are to your imminent demise. And then you end up like Mark.
Where is he? Where is he? Where'd he go? Where'd he go? Where'd he go? Where are both of them? Both of them. Hi, you're really close to me. Oh God, it's not 6 a.m. yet. Hi.
Now, by the time I played it, I don't remember how many videos there were, but I did see a lot of what Mark did, and one thing kept sticking out to me. He's spending a lot of time in the cameras and checking the lights when no one is there, and that's draining a lot of power. So I thought to myself, okay, we need to get through the night. To do that, we need to not run out of power. Using cameras takes power, but do we need to see where they are at all times? Well, I know that Bonnie and Foxy come down the left hallway, and Chica and Freddy come down the right hallway. Only Bonnie and Chica come up to the doors and look in. Foxy drains power, and you need to watch him so he doesn't move. Alright, we need the camera for that, but maybe we don't need to be in it all the time for that. Okay, so what else? Do we need the cameras for the others? Well, Freddy laughs when he moves, and he's at your door on the 5th laugh. Alright, we don't need the cameras for him. What about Chica? Well, Chica goes to the kitchen before she comes here, and the kitchen is audio only. But we don't need to be in the cameras to hear that. We can hear the pots and pans getting tossed around. So if she's in there, there's going to be some noise. And then it'll be a minute before she's actually at the door. But hold on, Freddy goes in there too. What's the difference? Right, he plays his music when he's in there. And we can also hear that without the cameras. Alright, cool. What about Bonnie? He doesn't really make any noise. Oh, wait a minute, what's that? Footsteps. Oh, that must be him moving. Wait, but Chica does the same thing. Hang on, do I even really need to track them at all? I got a fucking door light that I can check every now and then. Well, I guess I don't really need to, but you know, if I do pay attention to the sounds, that'll keep me from spamming the lights too much, and that'll save me even more power. Because I know what happens if I die to stupid things like not checking the doors enough so they break the controls, or not closing the door before I check the cameras so Freddy kills me, or I don't check Foxy enough and he runs from me, or running out of power, or especially when this fucking bullshit happens and they keep failing the goddamn movement attempt, so they stay at my door and drain all my fucking power, Bonnie, you goddamn asshole. I do get frustrated at that if it happens a lot, because that means I failed. That means I'm not good enough. And instead of initially getting better, I just get frustrated. That's how I am. It's one of my flaws. But then I did get better, and I came up with a groundbreaking solution. Don't look at the cameras. Save for the brief few seconds to look at Foxy to let him chill out. Focus on the best way to save my power. Track the characters through the audio cues, and I can get pretty damn accurate with where they are and survive. So that lessens the frustration. And frustration of a player is not the intention nor the goal of horror. But there is a problem with this method. Since I stopped using the cameras, the atmosphere in the environment doesn't have a chance to work, and I'm so hyper-focused on specific sounds for me to track the characters and know when they're at my door. The immersion goes away, and now there's just mechanics. And I know them like the back of my hand now. It's important to keep players from seeing mechanics as mechanics or having the opportunity to do so.
You need to keep the player from understanding its systems in a horror game. That will spell the death of your game and its presence. The moment that someone can figure out where the strings are and how to manipulate them, it's over. Obviously this applies to every single game, but when the focus is so hard on the payoff in a game, there isn't going to be much to talk about in terms of building up the game, is there?
Obviously, Mahler is mostly talking in critique of Outlast in that clip, but he is right. The second you stop seeing the game in the way it's dressed up and start seeing the mechanics as just mechanics and know how they operate and how you can leverage that, the game stops being scary and the illusion is broken. But I understand this is mostly a me problem. I am aware that not everyone plays the game the way I do, so maybe this is a problem of my own design. But it's at least important for me to explain where I'm coming from so all of you can understand. It's okay if you don't agree. I'm not asking you to. So I just chalk it up to it's just not my kind of game. I need more to do. I would say platformers like Super Mario are a little bit different, but even those I don't end up playing very long. Mario Odyssey is the only Mario game I've played to the end so far. Not even Mario Sunshine. Maybe there is something to what I said. Maybe I'm just an asshole who doesn't like Five Nights at Freddy's. I don't know. That said, on a first time playthrough, repeating gameplay aside, I have a decent amount of praise for it. I think it does a good job at keeping the gameplay simple enough with only a handful of mechanics so damn near anyone can play it. You can use the lights to check for threats and close the doors at the cost of some of your power, or you can check any of the 11 cameras. The more things you have activated, the quicker your power drains. You have 4 threats in total to deal with: Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, and Freddy. Bonnie is one of the simplest to deal with. He'll only come down the left hallway and hit every camera until he reaches your door. The only thing he'll do is just appear in the door if you check your light when he's there. If you're not fast enough, he'll jam your controls and it's game over. Though if he just surprises you and you flip into your camera, you're usually safe if you quickly flip it back down and you close the door. But you also don't really need the lights or the cameras to know he's at your door. If you hear this sound, that's your cue that either Bonnie or Chica are at your door. Speaking of Chica, I found her to be a lot more aggressive early in the week, like nights 2 and 3, but in later nights, it's more like a competition between the two to see who shows up at my door more. Anyway, she comes down the right hallway and she works the exact same way as Bonnie. And if you find yourself with broken doors and just don't do anything, then Foxy will come and kill you. This is because Foxy activates if you don't check the cameras periodically to block his movement attempts to his different stages. Stage 1, he's fully inside the curtains. Stage 2, he's peeking out. Stage 3, he is out of the curtains ready to run. And Stage 4, he's gone and running towards you. The game will have you believe that you need to check his camera specifically to block his movement attempts, but you just have to be in the cameras in general. Though I do think it's a good idea just to have it on his camera, so if you do happen to slip and he advances stages, you can see that. In his final stage when he's running at you, you can either flip down the cameras and have 25 seconds to close the door, or you can look at camera 2A and see him sprint at you. If you do this, however, you will now only have about 5 seconds to close the door on him. If you manage to close the door, he will knock and drain power.
If you block his attack with the door for the first attack, he's going to draw 1 power. For the second attack, he's going to draw 6, and for third and beyond, he's going to draw 11.
And of course, if you run out of power, then that's when you meet with Freddy. Now, speaking of Freddy, he is the easiest to deal with next to Bonnie. You always know when he moves because he laughs, and like Chica, he only comes down the right hallway. But this is where he gets a little tricky. Once he reaches camera 4B, you can do one of 2 things with him. If you keep the camera on 4B, you do not have to close the doors when you check the cameras. However, if you have the camera on, say, Foxy instead, then you will need to close the door before you check the camera. But you can open it back up once you are out of the cameras, because he will only enter your office if you check a camera that is not 4B without closing the door. It seems a little complicated, but once you understand it, it becomes very, very simple again. But if you don't know that at the time, I do understand that encountering him for the first time is quite the difficulty curve, and I believe that curve is just enough to snap you out of the atmosphere and send all of that scary stuff right out the window. So anyway, all of that said, this isn't a game that I'm personally interested in playing more than once. And unlike some people, I don't see that as negative. Like, oh no, I don't want to play this game more than once. Whatever shall I do? Maybe play one of the other 500 games in my library. Such a weird argument, man. A game isn't replayable. Oh no, what a nightmare. Anyway, yeah, this isn't a game that I'll play more than once anymore. Now let's get into my forte, the story. As we get into this game for the first time, the only information we're provided with is there's an article in the newspaper advertising that an establishment called Freddy Fazbear's Pizza is looking for a security guard for the night shift. And as we load into the game for the first time, we are greeted with this closet of a room complete with a CCTV system, doors on either side, and the inability to use our legs for any reason. Now a little information about me. As of writing this line, I am an armed security guard. And that's all the information you're gonna get about that. But I've been at it for a few years now, and I have, and occasionally still do, work night shifts. This is territory that I am familiar with. So, for this particular game, I'll take a quick look at it from this perspective after we get familiar with what the story is. Now, I'm not going to get into the deeper hidden lore of the game for the reasons that I said earlier. So we're just going to go with what we're openly presented with. It's the late 1900s and our character is Mike Schmidt. One day, Mike sees an advertisement in the local newspaper for a pizzeria called Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, looking for a night shift guard. A 6-hour graveyard shift guarding some old robots that nobody cares about in an empty building. Watch some cameras. Probably the easiest job in the world. So he shows up for his first night on the job. He relieves the day shift guy and takes his post when he gets a phone call. It's a recorded message from a guy that said he worked in that office before Mike, and is actually finishing up his last week as he's recording the message. So, safe to assume he's probably the previous night guard, and then he left, so they needed a new one. Hence the advertisement. Got it. Cool. The call starts off pretty normal with a company greeting and a disclaimer that the company is not responsible or liable for any death or injury that occurs. But then things start taking a turn when he mentions that someone was gravely injured by one of the animatronics, hence why they're no longer allowed to move around during the day. And then Mike learns that his job is not going to be as easy as it seemed, and there's more danger than he realized. The animatronics move around, and if they find him, they won't see him as a person since it's after hours. To them, he'll just be an endoskeleton without a costume, and since that's against the building rules, they'll try to put a costume on him. A procedure which will most certainly kill him. So he needs to get through the entire week and make sure none of the animatronics come into the office, while also conserving the limited power that the building apparently has. What a wonderful introduction. So the shift ends and Mike comes back for night 2, where he learns the animatronics become more active as the week progresses. Except for Freddy himself, who usually only really becomes active in the dark. More reasons not to run out of power. Also, there's an animatronic in Pirate's Cove that he needs to keep an eye on. Night 3, business as usual, but night 4. Mike suddenly learns that the advertisement wasn't because the previous guard left. The animatronics got him. He is very much dead. But Mike manages to survive. Time to close out the week. He made it this far after all. But something strange happens at the beginning of the night. He gets another recorded call, but it's unintelligible. Regardless, he does it. He survives. Mike gets through the whole week. The nightmare is over. No more animatronics will come to kill him. But there is overtime. Hell of a story, huh? Alright, we'll do this really quick. So, as a security guard working in an establishment like this, my top concern is going to be the safety of the customers and the employees. Now, why is that important? Aside from the obvious reasons, if you're negligent to the safety and security of not only your customers but your employees as well, then that will result in injury and in the worst case scenario, death. And then that will land you with multiple lawsuits that you will definitely not win and definitely jail time, if you don't wind up dead yourself. Now, like I said, as we load in, we have a camera system, 2 doors, and 2 lights that are all on limited power. One of the cameras is down and we only have audio in that room, and our onboarding is done by a recorded phone message. So we learn very quickly that we are the only person in the building. We're not armed, and our situation is very much less than ideal. So right away, I have questions that are major red flags from a security perspective. Firstly, the limited power. How do you have a restaurant that has the capability of running out of power? What if the power goes out in the middle of service? Why does the power go out? Why is the establishment running on basically a weak generator? Even if the business is going under, that's a safety concern that needs to be addressed. Secondly, the down camera. If you have a camera down, that needs to be resolved immediately. That poses all kinds of risks for customers and employees. In low crime areas, it's not ideal, but you can get away with a delayed response on a camera that's down, but it still needs to be quickly addressed. And lastly, us being alone. Where and who is our supervisor? Who is doing our onboarding? Is he a senior guard? Why are we alone? Our specific situation is a major red flag. For me at least. We absolutely should not be alone and we should not be unarmed. I'll explain why. It is strictly based on the reputation and history of this chain, Freddy Fazbear's. Because at this point in the overarching story, there have been multiple reported homicides at previous establishments, missing children's reports, and attraction malfunctions resulting in severe injury and death of customers. And to my knowledge, at this point the person was never caught, so this situation would absolutely warrant armed security. And I would have multiple guards on shift, 3 minimum. 1 looking at cameras, 1 at the entrance, and 1 walking around. Now on top of that, we also have issues with the attractions themselves, evidenced by this audio clip.
Something about their servos locking up if they get turned off for too long. They used to be allowed to walk around during the day too, but then there was the bite of 87. Yeah, it's amazing that the human body can live without the frontal lobe, you know?
Yes, the fabled bite of 87. One of the animatronics, assumed to be Foxy, bit a customer so severely enough that the customer needed the frontal lobe to be removed. And for some reason, the animatronic is still in the building. Yeah, so we're looking at multiple safety and security violations, multiple lawsuits that the company will not win, and potential jail time for negligence to safety. All of these factors in mind, if I was working there, I would suspect foul play on the management's part, because never addressing any of these concerns, yeah, there's no way this place is staying in business, and there is not a single person working there that doesn't know that. Then again, I think the phone guy said it best.
Well, if you're hearing this, then chances are you've made a very poor career choice.
Focusing in on the game a bit more, we have our friendly phone guy say this.
Now, concerning your safety, the only real risk to you as a night watchman here, if any, is the fact that these characters, if they happen to see you after hours, probably won't recognize you as a person. They'll most likely see you as a metal endoskeleton without its costume on. Now, since that's against the rules here at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, they'll probably try to forcefully stuff you inside a Freddy Fazbear suit.
An animatronic that can't tell the difference between a human and a metal endoskeleton in low light conditions is an extreme safety concern, and they should never be allowed to roam whatsoever, regardless of the risk to their servos. In a real-world setting, any machine or robot that can't clearly identify a human being would never be allowed in an environment where it could interact with people, let alone roam freely, especially when one of the robots physically attacks and injures a customer. The establishment would be shut down before you could even say lawsuit. You know what? Let's take a look at the rest of the call.
Welcome to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, a magical place for kids and grown-ups alike, where fantasy and fun come to life. Fazbear Entertainment is not responsible for damage to property or person. Upon discovering that damage or death has occurred, a missing person report will be filed within 90 days or as soon as property and premises have been thoroughly cleaned and bleached and the carpets have been replaced.
Unless your customers and employees are signing waivers saying the company is not liable for any harm, the first line will never be a thing, particularly to employees. Workers' comp is a thing, and it exists to protect employees from unsafe work environments in the event that something goes horribly wrong by no fault of theirs. As for the rest of what he said, yeah, no, if it's not in writing, it doesn't exist. Police would be called, and an investigation would take place to find out what the hell happened.
The animatronic characters here do get a bit quirky at night, but do I blame them? No. If I were forced to sing those same stupid songs for 20 years and I never got a bath, I'd probably be a bit irritable at night too.
If you, as a security guard, ever noticed any kind of essential equipment, like the animatronics, in some form of disrepair or low maintenance, and any day shift guards mention customers saying they smell odd, you would report that to maintenance or whoever is responsible for maintaining the equipment. Because again, safety is the concern. Any establishment trying to cover up or delay the report of harm, especially something as severe as death, would face immediate legal consequences. And I would say if you ever get an introduction like this on your first day, my advice would be to quit and leave the building as soon as possible. Now, this is fun. Let's look at the rest of the calls.
I won't talk quite as long this time since Freddy and his friends tend to become more active as the week progresses. It might be a good idea to peek at those cameras while I talk, just to make sure everyone's in their proper place, you know. Interestingly enough, Freddy himself doesn't come off stage very often. I've heard he becomes a lot more active in the dark, though, so hey, I guess that's one more reason not to run out of power, right?
Yeah, this is all game mechanic stuff. There's not much for me to say about it since the game explains it for you. Though I will point out, I remember when this game first released and everyone didn't listen while the guy was talking and then was surprised when they couldn't figure out what was happening. It very quickly revealed how many people just do not pay attention when playing games like this.
Hello. Hey, you're doing great. Most people don't last this long. I mean, you know, they usually move on to other things by now. I'm not implying that they died. That's not what I meant.
If an employee ever says anything like this, and it's pretty clear they aren't joking, leave. Alright, now here's the call that grabs my attention the most.
Oh, hello. Hey, wow, day 4. I knew you could do it. Hey, listen, I may not be around to send you a message tomorrow. It's been a bad night here for me. I'm kind of glad that I recorded my messages for you when I did. Hey, do me a favor. Maybe sometime you could check inside those suits in the back room. I'm going to try to hold out until someone checks. Maybe it won't be so bad. Yeah, I always wondered what was in all those empty heads back there. You know. Oh no.
So a couple things. First, the most obvious. If the guy that has been training you via phone call is killed by the animatronics that are in the building with you during one of his phone calls, that is your biggest signal to pack up and leave, and that is your evidence that the establishment needs to be shut down for an unsafe working environment, and the animatronics need to be decommissioned and scrapped on the spot. Second, considering that he was the one who is telling us how to stay alive throughout the week, I would be very intrigued by the fact that he got caught. Also, I can hear the animatronics banging on the door, so he has a door closed, and they were pounding on it until it gave out and opened, signifying very aggressive behavior that we do not experience on our shift, which makes me wonder what exactly he did to trigger such a response. Also the doors close vertically and down, so if the power fails while the doors are down, they'll stay down because there will be no power to activate the winches to lift the doors. Pick! Sorry, I kind of got off topic there. Yeah, just small things that I noticed that apply to my profession. I thought it was interesting. Let's get back on track. I have questions about the story. And this is another reason why I chose to stick with the surface story and not the deep lore. I'll call it deep lore from now on. The deep lore story. Because in this game, the surface story is they're animatronics that are trying to get to your office because that's where the people are, and if they see you, they won't recognize you as a person, think you're an endoskeleton without a costume, and they'll force you into a suit because not wearing one is against the rules. If I were to go with the deep lore, that would include Remnant, the souls of dead kids, the purple guy, Henry Afton, whether or not Mike Schmidt is Afton's son, the older brother looking for revenge. That's a lot, and it makes my head hurt thinking about it. Even just in the context of this game. And besides, we'll get to some of that whenever I cover the other games, so it's fine. Fine, I'll look at the spooky newspaper clippings and the other stuff that you can find in the game, but I'll save that for last. Back on topic! We're looking at the surface story, and I have questions. Why does the building lose power after a certain point? Is it on a generator? If so, why is a business that is a restaurant switched to a generator at night? It has a kitchen. That would have refrigerators and cold storage that would need to remain powered at all times to keep food from going off. It's important to ask questions when analyzing stories. You can have unrealistic scenarios in games or shows or movies and still have it meet a certain realism. That's one of the beauties with science fiction. You can do just about anything, but it has to be believable. There needs to be a certain amount of realism that you stick to that will make the world be more believable. Because if the world isn't believable, it is incredibly hard to maintain immersion. If you're not immersed, the horror will wane and eventually die until there's nothing there for you to be scared of. In the case of Five Nights, the game is simple enough to where you don't really notice it too much, so it doesn't appear to be much of an issue, but once you start thinking about things, it all just leaves more questions than answers, and not in a good way. Like the animatronics not recognizing you as a person. That would seem to be a pretty fucking major design flaw on the part of their programming. if they don't see the night shift security people as people, do they also not see customers as people? That doesn't seem right. They'd be stuffing everyone in costumes if that was the case. So maybe it has something to do with it being dark in the building and low lighting in the office because there's only one light bulb. Alright, so what if the power goes out during business hours? I don't see any windows anywhere, so it'll be dark in the building. So does that mean they'll start putting customers in suits then? Well, that doesn't seem right either. Hey, wait a minute, that's right, they aren't allowed to walk around during the day anymore because of the dreaded bite of 87 where someone got injured and no longer has a frontal lobe. Well, that seems like a pretty major injury. Why are they still in the building if someone was injured by one of them? That also seems like a pretty major design problem. What was it about the person that made the animatronic flip out and bite said person? Do we share that quality? Like I said, lots of questions, no answers. Speaking of questions, why are they only active between 12 a.m. and 6 a.m.? What happens after 6 a.m. hits? Did they just drop whatever they're doing and return to the stages? Why do they need 6 hours of walking around to keep the servers from locking up? I feel like just a little bit of lubrication and grease, letting them walk around for maybe an hour max would be enough. You know, regular maintenance, since these are machines. Also, if they're supposed to move around to keep their servers from locking up, why do they get increasingly active as the week progresses? That seems like an odd thing to have in their programming. And on top of that, why does Freddy not move much? Wouldn't he be programmed to keep his servers from locking up too? Am I looking too deep into this? Maybe, but I say I'm not looking hard enough. These are only questions I have while briefly thinking about the situation we're in. Like I said, there needs to be a certain realism maintained. Is the setting spooky? Sure. But there's just so much about it that doesn't make sense. It's all in their programming. Why? Why would any of that be in their programming? They're breaking down. Why is no one fixing them? And the last question, which is very valid to ask, why do we keep coming back? You will notice in these horror games that I end up talking about, there is a reason for the protagonist to continue to do all the things that would make us turn around and leave on the spot. Whether or not they're good reasons is another conversation, but regardless, there are reasons. Let's look at a few examples. Resident Evil 4, Leon needs to rescue Ashley and escape. Resident Evil 7, Ethan needs to rescue Mia and escape. Resident Evil 8, Ethan needs to get his daughter back and escape. Outlast, Miles is a hardcore journalist and he's determined to discover the truth behind what's happening at the asylum after being contacted by a whistleblower. Outlast 2, Blake needs to rescue Lynn. The Forest, you need to find and rescue your son. Amnesia, Daniel needs to get to Alexander and decide what to do with him. Soma, Simon needs to escape on the Ark. Five Nights at Freddy's 1. We get a $100 paycheck. That's not worth it as far as I'm concerned, I'm just saying. Alright, now let's talk about the wild stuff. So, if you look a bit deeper during the game, you get a chance at seeing some rare and admittedly freaky stuff. You can see Freddy stare at the camera, you can get all the empty heads and the endoskeletons staring at you, the Freddy poster can change, the pictures in the East Hall can change to either screaming children or It's Me papers. You can get the It's Me hallucinations, you can get a Bonnie death screen, and of course, you can get Golden Freddy. I'll get the easy one out of the way first. Golden Freddy. Because of my playstyle, I never saw him, and fortunately pretty much everyone knows about this, but there's a rare chance for the Freddy poster to change to Golden Freddy and he'll appear with a laugh and he'll have a lifeless appearance. To get rid of him, just flip up the camera. All of the things that stare at you is obviously unsettling the first time you see it because obviously, what the fuck? It's creepy, but ultimately doesn't mean anything. It's just an extra spook. I like it, but not much to it. Same with the Bonnie death screen. The It's Me stuff, that ties into deep lore story, or at least it does now. Don't rightly know if it did before, and unfortunately I have no idea what was in Scott's mind when he originally had this in, because it's obviously something. If you guys have any information about that, let me know. But there is one other thing that can happen that I didn't mention yet. The rules poster can change to 4 different news clippings describing a missing children's incident at the pizzeria. Kids vanish at local pizzeria, bodies not found. 2 local children were reportedly lured into a back room during the late hours of operation at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza on the night of June 26th. While video surveillance identified the man responsible and led to his capture the following morning, the children themselves were never found and presumed dead. Police think that the suspect dressed as a company mascot to earn the children's trust. 5 children now reported missing, suspect convicted. 5 children are now linked to the incident at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, where a man dressed as a cartoon mascot lured them into a back room. While the suspect has been charged, the bodies themselves were never found. Freddy Fazbear's Pizza has been fighting an uphill battle ever since to convince families to return to the pizzeria. Quote, "It's a tragedy." Local pizzeria threatened with shutdown over sanitation. Local pizzeria Freddy Fazbear's Pizza has been threatened again with shutdown by the health department over reports of foul odor coming from the much-loved animal mascots. Police were contacted when parents reportedly noticed what appeared to be blood and mucus around the eyes and mouths of the mascots. One parent likened them to reanimated carcasses. Local pizzeria said to close by year's end. After a long struggle to stay in business after the tragedy that took place there many years ago, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza has announced that it will close by the year's end. Despite a year-long search for a buyer, companies seem unwilling to be associated with the company. These characters will live on. In the hearts of kids, these characters will live on. CEO. So, someone took one of the mascot costumes, lured 5 children into the back room, where they were murdered, and hid the bodies in the animatronics. Somehow. And after police were alerted and the place failed to retain business afterwards, understandably, the building was set to close by the year's end. Which I suppose could account for the limited power thing, but that's still a stretch. Even a failing business can keep the lights on until they close. Now, this part of the lore behind the game, it is interesting once you actually see all of this weird stuff happen. It gives you a bit of a new look on the game. And as far as the story goes with those new newspaper clippings thrown in the context of just this game alone, it is a failing business with a tragic past that is shutting down by the year's end, and that's as far as it goes. So, what would I keep and what would I change to make it work? Considering the nature of the game and how short it is, it doesn't really have any character with development to focus on. I'm honestly not sure. I know that I would try to add a reason why we're here that's clear to the player. I don't know what that would be. I would have the phone guy say why the animatronics are still in the building after the bite accident. If the place is shutting down, they need to keep the assets in one place. Makes sense, but I feel like that's something that should be said from a mentor type character to a new employee taking over the position. I would try to have the phone guy explain what happens at 6 a.m. Like, they're programmed to shut down and return to their stages or something like that. But, well, that raises some other questions. I don't know. I just really want to know how that whole 6 a.m. thing plays out. There's really not a lot that I think I would change. The story works well enough despite the questions, and the game is short enough that I don't think it's too much of a problem. In conclusion, I find the story of the franchise fascinating. And I do definitely see aspects of this game that can be scary, but the gameplay just doesn't do it for me anymore. So, I don't really think it's good as a game. But hey, those are just my thoughts. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and sincerely, thank you, all of you, so much. 1,000 subscribers is not a number that I thought I would ever hit. I've been making content on this channel for 10 years now, and after a while I was pretty confident that I was mostly just talking to myself. So all of this has completely blown me away, and none of it would have been possible without all of you. So truly, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. And again, thank you for watching the video, and I will see you next time.